Hey, my fellow multidimensionals. It's lovely to see you here. It's Asia Love, founder of Multidimensional U.com. Here we are on the banks of the Bitterroot River in Montana, making a nice energetic connection here with you before we go back to being mental. There we go. Can you feel that? Can you feel that lovely connection? So we operate outside linear time and space, and so I can connect with you while I'm recording this and really feel that, and it feels so good. And by good, I mean really present. So thanks for your presence. That really is a precious gift in this world of all the noise. So this week in this Wayshower's Weekly, I really want to gift you a little bit more insight behind this evolution in our embodiment, out of the mental, right? We're shifting out of a largely mental embodiment. Woo-hoo. But sometimes our mental is like, but wait, what does that mean? So, of course, with beautiful synchronicity, I was guided to a stack of transcripts from years of channeling for clients, and this one just came right to the front. And I mean, even like the way I opened it up, it's like pages long, and it was like this page, and it so beautifully articulates this evolution in our embodiment, and then the ensuing release of the ego's attachment to the way it's used to doing things. And so I'm going to read the channeling. It's from Ascended Masters Mary Magdalene and Yeshua. And I remember this channeling, I went really deep in trance. I mean, I could feel like they were giving this client their all energetically. Because a lot of these constructs that keep us in a limited state are really dense, and they can be kind of like, super sticky. They're hard to break through. And it requires kind of a really profound energetic response. So, in my client sessions today, we can talk about this shift, but really the way that the shift occurs is by activating more of the multidimensional self. What does that mean? It means we're shifting, releasing, dissolving density, and expanding back into more of the other dimensions of reality that have been here all along, especially as it relates to our multidimensional field. It's just that we've been so entrained and conditioned to only focus on about this much of the spectrum and largely in the mental body. Before I share the channel material, I think it's useful to share the response to a question I got today that I've actually heard this a lot. Why I shouldn't need external anything. I should be able to just, do this myself. Why can't I get my own guidance? And I mean, this goes way back to Be Your Own Guru, which I used to teach, and why that's so challenging. And it has to do with all of this conditioning to only perceive this much reality and not trust anything that you get outside of this much reality. So the guidance, the response to that kind of question that I hear over and over, it's more of a statement. And it is, how do you gain fluency in another language? Does it just befall you? I mean, some people, maybe. And I think we're actually evolving into that. But for the most part, there's mentorship, but most importantly, there's entrainment via immersion. So if the people you're spending all your time around are not fluent in multidimensional reality, and they're only focusing on this, they're only speaking this language, why you would never expect to be able to become fluent or literate, right, in multidimensional reality if you're only speaking this one language. Just a beautiful response to something that I think sometimes trips us up on our journey and prevents us from asking and seeking out the help that we really deserve and we need. Lord knows I've invested a lot in myself over the years. I look back, the arc of the last 20 years, and I see it's just been the steady, feel like climbing the ladder and seeking out people who have climbed just a few steps ahead of me, or maybe quite a few. So yeah, there's no shame in seeking out, others who can help you become fluent. That's the point. All right, so now let's get into this channeled material. All right, so let me give you some context here. And let me back up and also say I understand why this channeling is being shared to a wider audience now. It's because so many of us, myself included, are going through our next round of deconstruction and our next round of emergence. And for some people, it's feeling like it's happening for the first time, right? There are a lot of people who are coming in this wave of major life events, deaths, job loss, sudden, unexpected, you name it, divorces, we could go on and on. Called my day spa the other day. They had a fire in the building, right? These types of things that jolt us out of our status quo and begin to bring us into, wait a minute, there's something bigger going on. We have to process our emotions differently, etc. And when I talk to my friend who's a counselor, she's just seeing people in this, her entire group of maybe 40 people. And so on the one hand, I have a lot of empathy because, right, going through our dark nights and these very disruptive events is very, it can be very disorienting, it can be very painful at times and stressful. But I take it as a really good sign because that means that more and more people are getting jolted out of same old, right? Where you just plug into the existing constructs, convention, lower dimensional constructs that really don't serve us, right? We've normalized them, but they are not the healthiest level of embodiment. So it's exciting to me that we're making this change. So I wanted to give you that context as well as maybe the other context I would offer is what I've been channeling all year and the embodiment I've shifted into, which is really move out of the over masculine, of the doing and the thinking, and take a mental vacation. And that's really anathema to those of us, right, who just making things happen and thinking all the time. And then you realize that you get to the 0 point. And from this space, your field is free to create at an entirely different level. And then you can get this inner tech transfer going with the other aspects of your multidimensional self that are not even in this star system. I just did one of these today, did one last Friday. They are amazing. These kinds of transfers of different galactic beings that have tremendous wisdom and abilities and perspectives to share. And so they're coming in now through your field to contribute to the evolution of the human collective. It's pretty exciting stuff. But if we're always in our heads and we're distracted in the physical, we're going to feel pretty dense and we're going to be around it, hang out in all the entanglements and distortions, and we're not really available for the bliss of the 0 point, that really quiet space that then allows us to tap our much greater field. So I want to give you that context as well for these messages, that is what I mean by let's revolutionize what it means to be human. I'm not going to grow a tail, although a tail would be fun, wouldn't it? I watch my cats with their tails and they express themselves, whip it around, and sometimes it's excitement, and sometimes it's, just another appendage to express yourself. It sounds kind of fun. So who knows? Maybe some of you will grow tails. But what we're really talking about is massive shifts in our embodiment. The other one I could speak to is just being able to speak matter into form. These are abilities that do exist. And when we get out of a largely mental-driven embodiment, you can feel that, can't you? It gets really powerful. And what I'm experiencing right now is all of a sudden, I came and sat down and I was feeling like that's the river and I'm here. And when I tap back into that activation, I'm like, I'm all of it. We are, there's a plurality of embodiment. Okay, well, I could geek out on that for hours. So let's get to the channel material. So many of you are beginning to shift again, all right? So those of you who follow me, I think you've been through quite a bit already. You can feel it again. Things are evolving again. And we might run into resistance and fears might come up. And that's good, because it's just going to show us this next layer of limited thinking that we have, the next level of programs that we're ready to release. All right, so here we go. This is what Ascended Masters Yeshua and Mary Magdalene shared. And it's kind of in response to this struggle that we get into with resistance. What we can share from our perspective is that you are trying to fit your higher dimensional self into the lower container. You see, it does not fit, does it? This is why the container is dissipating, dematerializing. The higher dimensional expression is breaking the container. There is no mold. In your lateral view shed, it will accommodate it. What would it be to be the Wayshower that breaks everything in order to come out anew through a time in the void space? Pay attention to how the ego responds. It has its preferences based on its limited view of what is appropriate, based on its own limited view of the future, based on its own limited view of what is good. We will tell you that many of you are now being asked to break your molds completely. These molds, right? Based on a number of different things, including the coordinates that we choose to exist in. You are not the only one to experience tremendous fear. You have the opportunity, however, to be among the first to walk that path bravely with conscious understanding of what is being asked of you. And I would add that it's not, the human feels like it's walking the path, the ego does. But what you start to realize is that your multidimensional field is the path. And the ego just has to surrender into letting itself be the path. It's, again, a very different way to relate to being human. You cannot perhaps see the way that we can see where this all leads to a much greater version of reality, a much more fulfilling embodiment and expression and creational process. One of these ancient races I channeled today in a client session, an ancient amphibian race, talked about being deep in the creational process, and that they chose their form in order to be able to live out that embodiment. Right? We've gotten so attached to our human form, like this is who we are, and then we kind of get this extra consciousness. It really flips things on its head to realize that there's consciousness that chooses its form, in this case amphibian form, to be able to run the kind of circuitry and have the kind of permeability and interaction with the field. I mean, it's just really cool stuff. I will circle back to help you see that the greater self that you are will no longer attempt to squeeze itself into contracted containers. This is usually when we start getting these huge, interrupting life events, right? It's like, grace period's over. Who would you be to be so brave as to allow this to occur, even with the fear, right? The fear is not going to go away, is it? It's Archangel Michael used to always talk about a ring of fire. It looks like a ring of fire. It looks like you're going to get burned. And that's the whole psychology behind it, is you have to be willing to face your fears and walk through your ring of fire. We are speaking of the annihilation experience. In the self-sacrifice, you discover the sacred within. This is what your higher self is orchestrating now, right? So I think a lot of these higher dimensional mystical terms got really distorted because they were being heard through very distortional lenses. So self-sacrifice is not like you have to work yourself to the bone in order to live well or something like that. A lot of the ways we've interpreted it here, it's much more about sacrificing the lower constructs of the self and identity to accommodate the greater self. And sure, there can be confusion around self-sacrifice and self-love. So they went on to talk about this. You must understand that when the ego construct intentionally decides to lose, to sacrifice itself, to go into annihilation, it is the death of the false self, and it is the liberation of the higher self, the true self. For the game that it thinks it's losing does not even truly exist. Right? So this was a lot of us pulling out of like, oh, that was an interesting game, the whole us and them and winning and losing and woohoo, and then wait, I think there's more. It is a distraction and distortion of ultimate proportion. That is what both myself and Yeshua have worked diligently to counteract, to bring in new teachings and understandings, but they too have been distorted. The time has come for you to let go of who you have been completely. You are not the only one. Many are manifesting crises, financial, physical. It is like trying to hold on to a very heavy rope and a sailboat that wants to go out to sea. The wind is becoming stronger and stronger, and your hands become burned by the rope, and you just let go. This is a really interesting description of this process that so many of us get caught in, right? The ego's resistance to what wants to be. So here's her advice. This obviously was Mary Magdalene speaking. Let this incredible boat and this wind carry you to shores you could not have imagined. Allow yourself to be swept out to sea. You will not drown. The opposite. You will find your wings. You must become the sailboat and the wind and the ocean. You are expanding beyond the mental body and its contracted, limited experience of reality. It is why during this time you will surrender to the feeling of floating, of being carried away without understanding what is happening or where you are going. That is what it means to surrender to the journey. Please understand, this is not an aimless journey, unguided. It is your higher self that is so lovingly directing and supporting you. It's just what I was saying earlier. It's like, it's not me and the river. It's like, we're all in this together. And your whole relationship to everything changes in that moment. And you actually address what I'm being shown right now is it really helps to address that deep feeling of disconnection, separation, and loneliness so many people are feeling right now, is to be able to connect with everything around you. I think it's a little easier in the natural world because there's just, the river isn't carrying a lot of distortion. At least this river isn't. And the trees and the forest and the earth and the soil. And then we kind of circle back to what I was saying earlier. A lot of people feeling like, why can't I get my own guidance? The number one response I always had for that is, you are getting your own higher guidance. You're just not listening to it. I try to laugh and be lighthearted about this. So I hope nobody takes that as like, I'm not mocking anyone. I laugh at myself all the time about where I continue to get stuck and where I used to get stuck. So, again, laughter helps break up density and distortion. So that's why you see me just laugh a lot. So the final bit that I want to share here that I think is really valuable for this time: decisions are an illusion of third dimensional reality. You are being presented with the illusion of choice, when in reality your higher self will align you to exactly where you need to be. The distraction of overthinking and extraneous mental noise and activity is draining you of your life force. There are indeed no decisions to be made, only surrender, alignment, and trust. When you feel called to act, it is because your higher self is directing you. Otherwise, your job, your role, your mandate is to not think. It's exactly what I was told all this year. Mental vacation. Your mandate is to not think, to feel instead, right? Go into feeling much more. To show up and be here for all of it without trying to contain it, limit it, or control it. It is time to relinquish control, which has been an illusion all along. So I hope that's helpful. I channel this material. I learn a lot from it because when I channel, I'm in the embodiment of the speaker, and so I can feel the knowing. And so I integrate it very quickly. I encourage you to re-listen to that message and call in Mary Magdalene as if she's speaking to you and feel the energetic integration happening, right? Yeah, they're telling me like a lot of stuff will start to snap into place for you. It's always a pleasure to share and connect. I love you all. Keep going. You're doing an amazing job. Amazing. Have a wonderful week. I love you. Hey everyone, I hope you'll join me for my upcoming free online class, Align with Your Soul Purpose. You can find all of the information at multidimensionalu.com. Go ahead and reserve your spot today.